Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this discussion of the 2021 budget with the Honourable Selina Robinson, BC's Minister of Finance. My name is Gary Shearer. I'm the Executive Director of the Delta Chamber of Commerce. As we start off our meeting today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen and Musqueam First Nations and of all the Hunkaminam speaking people who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. I would also like to offer my respect to all the elders who've gone before us and the elders and First Nations people who are with us here today. We're proud to say that for over 111 years, the Delta Chamber of Commerce has been facilitating gatherings like this to bring together regional and national thought leaders with you, the people who actually make the capital investment and job creating decisions that drive our economy. I'd like to thank each of you for contributing your business to our business community and taking the time to be part of this gathering today. We are very pleased to have the Honourable Selina Robinson here today to speak with us about the 2021 budget. Selina Robinson was first elected as the MLA for Coquitlam-Maillardville in 2013. She previously served as a Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, where she led the record housing investments through the 10-year Homes for BC plan to build housing of all types in communities throughout the province. She also managed major capital investments in public transit through her work with the Mayors Council and TransLink, and worked tirelessly to support local governments through the pandemic. As a former city councillor, Selina fought to protect the health of children and families by introducing a local ban on cosmetic pesticides and worked to improve access for people with disabilities as chair of the Coquitlam Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee. Before being elected, Selina had a home-based family therapy practice, was the Director of Development for Share Family and Community Services, and was a counseling instructor and program developer at the University of British Columbia's Life Learning Center and Vancouver Community College. Selina lives with her husband Dan in Ranch Park neighborhood of Coquitlam-Maillardville, where they raised their now adult children, Aaron and Leah. We encourage your participation after Minister Robinson's presentation. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions in the chat box or by using the raise hand feature before unmuting yourself and asking your question. A recording of this event will be made available after it ends. So before I ask the minister to take over, I'd just like to recognize that we have Councillor Dylan Kruger with us today from the City of Delta. And I believe we also have our chair of the board, Rick Gibbs, on the line. With that, Minister Robinson, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. And I want to thank you. I want to thank the Delta Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to join with you this afternoon. And joining me here in our little makeshift studio is the MLA for Richmond, Queensborough, Aman Singh, and he'll be speaking to you in a little bit, a number of slides in. I think we can all agree that this has been a year like no other. We faced significant challenges in this last year because of the pandemic, and we continue to face challenges. We continue to be affected by COVID-19, and we know that we're going to feel the effects of this pandemic for some time. But there's also really good reason for hope. We have a vaccination program that is rolling out, and I believe today was just a couple hours ago, I think it was announced that 50% of Canadians have at least their first shot, and we need to keep delivering the message to make sure that everybody gets vaccinated, and also that there are some positive signs in our provincial economy. So Budget 2021 is about building today for a better tomorrow. It responds to the impacts of the pandemic, today's challenges, as we prepare for recovery that is to come. When we're doing this by investing in healthcare, by strengthening the services that we all count on, and by building a bridge to recovery and the better days that are indeed ahead. The pandemic will end, and when it does, British Columbia will be ready for the opportunities that absolutely will come with recovery. And that is a powerful testament to the people, the businesses, and the communities, the absolute resilience that they have all shown and they continue to show. So before I move on to budget details, I do want to do a brief review of the broader economic picture. This slide shows private sector growth forecasts for Canada and the provinces. All provinces saw significant impacts last year, as shown in the chart on the left. A recovery is expected for this year, and in the recent weeks, private sector forecasters have updated their near-term economic growth projections for BC to show an even stronger recovery. The projection shows BC's recovery is expected to be better than the national average, and it speaks to the resiliency, once again, of BC's economy, that despite the challenges of this last year, our strengths remain. We have an abundance of natural resources, we're a gateway to Asia, and we have highly skilled people. Budget 2021 is focused on the province's response and recovery from the effects of COVID-19. Budget deliberations took a very thoughtful approach to make sure that government continues to first and foremost protect the health and safety of British Columbians, as well to support people and businesses as we continue to manage through the effects of this pandemic, and to do the important preparation work that will be ready to seize, so that we'll be ready to seize the opportunities that will come with recovery. In addition to new permanent investments of $8.7 billion over the fiscal plan, we've also included significant pandemic and recovery contingencies, which is essential to keeping us nimble and responsive to your needs and the needs of all British Columbians. This will also ensure that the province can continue to deliver COVID-19 response and recovery measures and help us manage the ongoing uncertainties and the risks that have come with this pandemic. Budget 2021 also makes significant new capital investments, commitments in the health, transportation, and education sectors. These are things like hospitals and schools and post-secondary facilities and transit, roads, and other infrastructure projects around the province. And it's expected to be a record $26.4 billion over the fiscal plan. Now, we all care about our friends and our families and about the negative economic impacts that we all suffer when there's a lack of services and supports for people who need it. And certainly this pandemic has shown us that if we don't have healthy people, we can't have a healthy economy. This last year has certainly highlighted the importance of strong health and mental health services. And as more and more people get vaccinated, we can certainly see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're just not there yet. And keeping people safe continues to be a top priority for us. Budget 2021 provides more than $4 billion in funding for health and mental health services to continue to protect people from COVID-19 and expand the services that we all rely on. This includes the continued support for the largest ever vaccination program in BC's history to ensure that every British Columbian can receive their vaccine. It also includes funding to reduce wait time for surgeries and give patients faster access to the help that they need. Included in this budget is support for seniors. They've had a significantly difficult year, certainly frightening and lonely. And so in this budget, we see improvements for long-term care and home care as well. Budget 2021 includes the largest investment in mental health services in BC's history. This is about building a network of mental health supports for youth through schools and for new Foundry centers, which have been incredibly successful. It also includes integrated child and youth supports in 15 more school districts. This budget also improves access to and quality of mental health services throughout British Columbia, improves mental health and addiction services for Indigenous peoples, and also helps more people get on the path to recovery with new substance use treatment and recovery beds. This budget also builds on critical health infrastructure with $7.8 billion in capital investments to support major construction projects like new and upgraded hospitals. And we'll have more to say about that in a few more slides. Every day, people and businesses across our province are working hard to fight the virus and to get life back on track. And we are working with you. We are continuing to invest in the services that people rely on. This budget increases funding in the K-12 education sector to support our children, our teachers, our support staff, our schools, and our families. And it includes free public transportation for children 12 and under in time for classes this September. And for families in Delta and south of the Fraser that rely on TransLink, this could save up to $672 per child per year. We also know that not everyone has been affected by the pandemic in the same way. For people who are already experiencing economic and social barriers, the pandemic presented an additional barrier by getting the help that they need. And that's why in Budget 2021, we're providing the largest permanent increase to income and disability assistance rates ever. And for low-income seniors, we doubled the senior supplements rate, the first increase in the history of the program. This program was started in 1987 and has never received an increase, and we're doubling the amount that low-income seniors get. Our government is also continuing to support people experiencing homelessness by providing more than 3,000 temporary shelters and hotel spaces for those who find themselves in our parks, on our streets, and in ravines. This also includes meals, support staff, and equipment needed to maintain safe shelters. These investments will help us continue to make progress toward meeting our poverty reduction goals of reducing overall poverty rates by 25% and the child poverty rate by 50% by 2024. We also know that quality, affordable, and accessible and inclusive childcare is critical to families, to communities, and to the economy. In 2018, we launched Childcare BC to bring affordable, accessible, and quality childcare to families right across the province. Since then, we have funded the creation of over 26,000 new childcare spaces, with thousands more new spaces funded each year under the New Spaces Fund. This budget creates even more spaces, and it helps to support the workforce behind the workforce. Our early childhood educators are getting a wage enhancement to make sure that they are well paid and can continue to stay in this sector, which we desperately need to continue to support. We are more than doubling the number of children who can get $10 a day or less daycare through the Universal Childcare Prototype Program. It also includes 400 new spaces for the Aboriginal Head Start program, which provides culturally relevant childcare for Indigenous families. When we think about childcare and we think about the federal government finally, and the day before we announced our budget, the federal government finally has decided to recognize the importance of childcare in the economy. And with their announcements, we know that we can deliver even faster on our childcare plans. And so that's a really good thing for British Columbians. Now, the COVID-19 has contributed, we know, to the high activity we are seeing in the housing market. With more people working from home, the demands for more space has increased activity. That, coupled along with low interest rates and a low inventory of homes, has certainly been driving up prices. We do expect some moderation in the market for 2022. We're starting to see a little bit more moderation in the last number of weeks, and we expect to see a little bit more moderation as recovery takes hold and all orders of government continue to work together to improve housing affordability. We've worked hard to tackle the housing crisis by addressing speculation, reducing rent increases, and currently we have a rent freeze in effect for British Columbia. We're also continuing towards our goal, meeting our goal of building over 114,000 homes in partnership over 10 years. To date, more than 26,000 new homes have been completed or underway under our BC Homes for BC plan. And Budget 2021 continues on that trajectory. We're continuing to fund new low and middle income housing with funding to non-profit providers and $1.6 billion of provincial capital investment. And new to this budget, we are providing $2 billion in additional financing to expand the Housing Hub program, which will deliver about 9,000 new homes for middle-income British Columbians over the next 3 to 5 years in partnership with the private sector and the nonprofit sector. To date, this program has delivered about 1,000 homes, and we're going to do even more over the next few years. Now, a central commitment of government is to make life more affordable for British Columbians. Budget 2021 focuses on investments that will ensure that no one is left behind as we continue to fight the pandemic and move into recovery. These investments build on previous measures taken to make a difference for people every day. This includes more affordable childcare that I had just mentioned earlier. If you recall, we've eliminated MSP premiums. This was the biggest tax cut in BC's history. The BC Child Opportunity Benefit that families started receiving last October was announced in the last budget, in the budget 2020, but for 2021 will deliver its first full year of savings for families. We've eliminated bridge tolls and student loan interest, and just May 1st, more affordable car insurance, which is making another significant impact in affordability for British Columbians. These measures and those in Budget 2021 all work together to make life more affordable for us here in BC. Now, Budget 2021 continues to provide measures to help businesses adapt and prepare to seize the opportunities that recovery will bring. We didn't wait to get support into the hands of the businesses that needed help. Budget 2021 builds on those supports, and we have continued to provide over this last year. This includes the Stronger BC tax incentive for employers that have hired or increased compensation in the last quarter of 2020 compared to the previous quarter. We have more funding for the Grow BC, Feed BC, and Buy BC strategies. A PST exemption for select machinery and equipment to help businesses expand their operations, and ongoing funding for the Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant Program. Budget 2021 includes supports targeted at the hardest hit sectors like tourism, arts, and hospitality. These supports include $120 million through Budget 2021 to support tourism recovery starting in this fiscal year, including support for major anchor attractions that help make British Columbia such a unique destination. And today we announced $50 million to support major attractions right across British Columbia. We have additional funding for community destination development grants that will help communities prepare for future visitors through new tourism infrastructure like trails and airport improvements. And of course, we're supporting about 14,000 restaurants, bars, breweries, wineries, gyms, and fitness centers through the most recent health restrictions through the Circuit Breaker Business Recovery Grants. We have been nimble through the pandemic in creating new supports quickly as they were needed. And we are adjusting our response as the landscape changes with this pandemic. That's exactly why we've built in significant pandemic and recovery contingencies into this budget so that we can continue to be nimble and responsive. The Circuit Breaker Business Relief Grant is a great example of this. The program was developed in less than a week. And as some of you may know, we recently just added an additional $75 million to our Circuit Breaker Relief Program and expanded its eligibility, recognizing the challenges facing hospitality, fitness, and accommodation sector businesses as a result of the restrictions put in place to help keep people safe. We will continue to get help out quickly to those who need it, when they need it, and we will continue to support businesses through this challenging time and help them prepare for recovery. Our government has made reconciliation with Indigenous peoples a cross-government priority. Budget 2021 includes stable funding to support engagement with Indigenous peoples on a range of matters, including land and resource activities and legislation and policy. We know that with certainty on the land base, there's more interest in investment. We are also providing funding to create more childcare spaces for Indigenous families, deliver the skills training initiatives that will lead to long-term employment for unemployed and underemployed Indigenous peoples. And of course, racism has absolutely no place in this province and in the delivery of its services. Our budget provides funding to implement recommendations from the In Plain Sight report and cultural safety and humility training across health and mental health addiction services. We know that the road toward reconciliation and addressing racism is long. Our government will continue to work with Indigenous peoples and First Nations communities to create a stronger and more inclusive British Columbian for everyone. And climate change. It is one of the most pressing issues facing British Columbians and the world. And we must make sure that a post-COVID future is a greener and more sustainable one. CleanBC is our plan to build a cleaner, more sustainable future Budget 2021 includes an additional $506 million in new investments to continue to reduce emissions and create new opportunities and promote affordability. Budget 2021's investments bring the total funding for CleanBC to nearly $2.2 billion over 5 years. And by keeping people healthy and investing in communities, we can move toward a strong economic recovery that includes everyone. Budget 2021 includes record levels of capital investment with $26.4 billion in funding over 3 years. This is a $3.5 billion increase when compared to Budget 2020. These investments support a strong and sustainable economy with investments in roads, transit, schools, housing, and hospitals. Investments like hospitals in Cowichan, Surrey, Stewart Lake, Dawson Creek, and the replacement of St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. We're investing in the future of BC through the InBC Investment Fund. The fund will invest $500 million in high growth potential businesses right here in our province, and it will leverage investments from the private and public sectors to help businesses grow. The fund will be instrumental in helping promising companies scale up, and it will help support startups, anchor talent, and keep jobs and investment right here in British Columbia. And with that, I would like to invite the MLA from Richmond Queensborough, Aman Singh, to share with you details on the next slide. Aman?
Thank you, Minister Robinson. Thank you, Chamber, for inviting us here. Pleasure to be here. Delta is near and dear to me. Lived in Sunshine Hills for many, many years. My law firm worked in a law firm in Delta, and now it straddles Delta. It's on the other side of Scott Road. So, thank you, Minister. So we continue to make record infrastructure investments in every corner of the province, creating good-paying jobs in communities like Delta. These ongoing investments build on those already made to date, including housing. The pandemic has shone a light on the importance of the substantial capital investments our government has made in Delta and communities throughout British Columbia. That includes 302 housing units we have invested in right here in Delta. This pandemic has also shown us how important it is to provide British Columbians with healthcare close to home. This budget continues to provide funding for the substantial improvements at Delta Hospital. Since we formed government, we have supported the expansion of clinical support at that hospital, including the construction of the newly opened Peter C. and Elizabeth Toigo Diagnostic Services building. Improvements to the hospital mean better outcomes for the people of Delta. The new diagnostic services building at Delta Hospital is part of our commitment to improve access to diagnostic services in our provinces for our people. Our government knows that transportation and the smooth flow of people and goods is important to all communities, including Delta. It's our priority as well. That's why Budget 2021 includes continued funding for Highway 91 improvements along Highway 91 to Highway 17 and Delta Port Way Corridor improvements. As my colleague Ravi Kalon, Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, told you in his address last month, the George Massey Tunnel Replacement Project is in the business case stage. Our government is actively reviewing the business case for a toll-free crossing, again, toll-free crossing, with Indigenous rights holders, the federal government, and mayors and other key stakeholders. The next steps before us are to review the submissions, consult with partners, and make a final decision. Our priority is and always will be to get the right project for the region and the right project for Delta, and we'll make our final decision as soon as possible. Once that plan is approved, Budget 2021 includes funding to get that project underway. And I'll pass it back over to the Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Aman. Well, we have certainly been through a great deal, and I'm sure that every single one of us can pinpoint a time last year, the moment that we really felt like our world had turned upside down. And COVID-19 has certainly been challenging for all of us. And it's changed, I think, British Columbians in ways I don't think none of us ever could have imagined. But one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is just how resilient British Columbians are. and how resilient our businesses are, and how our communities have come together. I think back to the 7 p.m. cheer that we all came out to, whether it was on our balconies or our porches or in our yards. And what that said to me as a British Columbian is that we really do look out for each other. And it certainly makes me very proud to be a British Columbian. And I know that recovery just won't happen overnight. But by focusing on the things that matter, to most people, I have confidence that we're going to keep making progress, and that government will continue to be here for British Columbians. And Budget 2021 supports people now to stay healthy, to stay safe, and it looks to the future, a future with opportunities for everyone to be part of a strong economic recovery. Thank you, and I look forward to taking some of your questions.
Thank you, Minister Robinson. We appreciate the details of that presentation. You certainly covered a lot of information for us, and thank you for taking the time to do that. So yes, we have a few questions. I'll start off. Yes, thanks for the update on the George Massey tunnel replacement. However, we were here back in 2019, early 2019, with the previous Minister of Transportation, who indicated there would be a business case completed by the end of that year. That year is gone. 2020 has gone by. Could you? I guess what we're looking for is some, what's the process and the likelihood, and you said as soon as possible. What does that mean? I mean, are we looking at this year as far as having a final decision and a project moving forward?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I know that Delta has certainly been struggling with the weight of traffic. I've sat in it. I know how awful it is for your residents, and I have a number of friends who live in Delta who complain to me regularly about it, and for good reason. It is the worst bottleneck for sure, and needs relief. But it also needs to be the right project, and it needs to be the project that works for the region. And that's why we made sure to identify what the project needs to be that would work for everybody. Getting to a business case, and I know that, and I hear your frustration in your voice, is a huge hurdle. And the business case has been done, and it is being reviewed to make sure that we have the two shortlisted options that were presented to the public in February 2020. And it's going through the process to make sure that we understand exactly what the component parts are. And it's a process that happens for every project doing the business case, whether it's a hospital or a transit or transit investment or a major highway or bridge. This is the process of government for any major infrastructure. It's making sure that we make the right decision, that we understand what all the risks are, and that we are fully cognizant of what the options are. So that has been ongoing. I know that the Minister of Transportation has been diligent in pushing this forward and making sure that the business case continues to stay very much top of mind. And so that has been going on. And I am hopeful that we'll have a decision shortly. It's very much a priority for us. And I also want to say that Ravi Kalan is a tremendous advocate in if I can say, a pain in the butt, can I say that, to the Minister of Transportation in making sure that he too is on top of that. And that's really what MLAs are supposed to do. And he's continuing to do that as well. So I know that it's very much an active file with lots of people assessing the business case as we speak.
All right, well, we will continue to wait and anticipate the great announcement we're going to hear sometime soon, we hope. Another question that came up is we're hearing from many business owners about very high stress levels and concerns about mental health um, as we reach this 15 months into the crisis. Can you tell us more about what your government's doing to invest in mental health resources that support British Columbians that will be ready and reliable once restrictions are lifted? I've heard a lot of experts say that PTSD in terms of people coming back from battle really doesn't kick in until after the crisis is done, or they're out of harm's way. And the concern and the expectation is that once we are out of the pandemic, there's going to be, a lot of issues and that people are going to be dealing with post-pandemic that they're going to need the support for, and they want to make sure the support is there.
Yeah,
Any
that's
comments on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, we are not waiting for the pandemic to be over to invest in mental health services, because the pandemic itself has created certainly some mental health challenges, particularly for youth. Their lost opportunities, their social engagement has all been impacted, and so we have been investing through this entire pandemic to make sure that there are opportunities available for youth and for others to access sort of, telephone counseling, online counseling, making sure that people can get the supports that they need. But we know that we're not through it yet. And that's why you see, the largest investment in mental health and addiction supports in this budget that we've ever seen before. And the total investment for health and mental health is $4 billion. It's also a very significant amount to continue to roll out the supports for counseling supports, for Foundry, for families, for children, youth in particular, that we know are continuing to really be challenged with not having access to the normal, what we would consider the normal activities of young people, going out and hanging out at the mall, going to parties, hanging out with your friends. Those are the normal activities. Going to school and hanging out in the hallway in front of the lockers. You can tell where I was. They haven't been able to do that. And so, we know that that's really having an impact. And so we have not waited for the pandemic to end to bring in additional resources. We have mental health services in schools. We're expanding child and youth programs for mental health supports to 15 more school districts. So we are continuing to expand and make sure that the resources are there for people when they need it.
Thank you for that response. I have a question from the Delta Housing Be Mine Society here, talking about the cost of shelter for folks needing assistance, and the $375 monthly shelter rate just is not enough to deal with housing because of the limit of BC housing units in Delta, where the average rent here is $1,200 a month. $375 just there, and there's just a huge gap there. Anything that the government can do to assist in these areas where people are falling through the cracks?
And I appreciate that. And there's still so much work for us to do. That's why we increased assistance rates by $175 a month, which is the largest increase in the history of social supports. There's certainly more to do. Over time, since we formed government, we've dramatically increased social assistance rates to help fill the gap. And there's still more housing for us to build. And I want to encourage anyone who's in the nonprofit sector to continue to reach out to BC Housing, through the Community Housing Fund, to build more subsidized housing for these people. The opportunities to make sure that we have a robust subsidized housing program. And the reason why we don't have enough is because for far too long, governments have not been in that realm. We had a federal government and a provincial government who for too many years did not see their role as building housing for those who need assistance. And so we are back in the game. The federal government is sort of back in the game. We're continuing to push them a little bit harder to, instead of back end loading their program, to front end load it, to match our dollars so that we can continue to roll out subsidized housing in as many communities as possible throughout the province.
Thank you. The next question we have is with regards to the highest and best use property tax assessment. That continues to be a challenge for our municipalities in being able to provide fair taxation for property owners that are running small businesses and are being assessed at very high rates because of their property's potential, and are essentially it's driving them out of business. Any updates or things in the horizon that are going to be able to relieve this situation?
Yeah, thanks for that. This is one that when I think back to pre-pandemic, this is certainly an active file. And we brought in legislation that when a local government makes changes to a land use plan or neighborhood plan and decides that they're going to be looking to redevelop a particular area to bring in more density, it actually drives up the value of the properties, of these commercial properties, because the potential to now build residential is sort of on the horizon. And of course, the way our highest and best use evaluation process works is their highest and best use, of course, is to densify. And that's because of the choices that local governments make. And rightly so, that is their role, is to build out the community so that it appropriately builds the densities where we need it. And that then puts pressure on the evaluation process. So what we did is we brought forward a temporary measure that would, again, give local governments a tool to say, because we've done this, we've changed the landscape in this neighborhood, we're going to shift the burden of taxes off of these properties, because we know that the decision that we've made as a council is to densify, but we're not ready yet to actively redevelop. So we can shift the burden. So we gave local governments that tool so that they could help these businesses in the interim. And so I would certainly encourage the Delta Council to take a look at this. There's some longer term work. You can appreciate that the assessment system is a rather complex system. And one of the concerns is that if you pull on one little thread on the other side to try to adjust the system, it has significant impacts on the other side, like shifting the tax burden over to residential, or to shifting it over to other businesses in other neighborhoods. So we're trying to, balance the system. It's also a provincial system. And so we're also looking at, how does it affect in rural British Columbia, other parts of British Columbia. And so, we, certainly at the last Union of BC Municipalities, not the last one, the one before that, it was like 2 years ago now, we certainly heard controversy among local governments that they're not, so sure about how this will play out for them. So that's why we have this interim measure. So councils, if they so choose, can use this to relieve the burden on some of their businesses, while we continue to do the important work of continued engagement to find the right tool and the right way to adjust this so that we can support those businesses. And if I could just say one last thing about that, and from my perspective, it's the triple net lease framework that I think certainly adds to this. If you think about a fair tax system, as you suggested, landowners that that own commercial properties that are now being considered for redevelopment, they're likely to make significant profit on their land as they redevelop. And the idea of the tax burden is to stimulate them to do that, which is, I think, a good thing given climate change, and we know that we need to densify. But the triple net lease framework, the traditional one, it's a pass-through, and it goes to the tenant, all of that tax burden. And so it becomes this real challenge around how do we make sure that the tax system is fair and applies the stimulus where we need it to apply. And so that's also part of the mix that I think we need to have a conversation about.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have here is with regards to having kids in school every day without food. We have 1 in 5 kids that go to school every day without food. The pandemic has only amplified this problem with vulnerable kids at home and even less support. What does your budget do to ensure no children in our province go hungry?
Well, it's certainly, I think a concern. We know that children, learn better on full stomachs, and it's heartbreaking that we have children who don't have access to food, and that's why we increased the assistance rates. Again, it's the largest increase. $175 is the largest increase ever made, and that, should go a long way. But also, I want to give a shout out to the Education Minister, Jennifer Whiteside, and our Agriculture Minister, Alana Popham, who have been tenacious in looking at school food programs and making sure that we have, the opportunities where it makes sense to do that. The other thing I want to point out is that we've also made significant contributions to food banks during the pandemic, because we know that there's been additional pressures put on food banks and helping people get access to food. But the reality is children don't have access to food because oftentimes their parents don't have perhaps the skills needed to participate in the economy. And that's why we are investing in this budget significant dollars in skills training and micro-credentials, helping people reskill, retool, so that they can, have jobs that and participate in the economy, so that they can have the dignity of going to a grocery store and purchasing the foods that their families want to eat. And so these are the ways that we are contributing to those families. And and other ways that we're contributing is by making, transit free for children. So that's another, $670 some odd dollars that would otherwise have to go to a bus pass. We've made, and if it isn't a family that uses transit, they pay lower fees now for insurance. They're paying less for insurance. And again, that's money that can be spent on food. And this affordability component that we're working on and driving at, removing tolls, that's $1,600 for families, for example, in Surrey that had to use the Port Mann, with paying a toll, that's back in their pockets. All of these things, childcare, another one, making childcare accessible and affordable. Everything that I mentioned in one of my slides, I don't remember which one it was, all of these things add to the affordability for British Columbians so that families have the dignity, because there's no dignity in going to a food bank. The dignity is in being able to go to a grocery store and to buy the foods when you need them, and to select the foods that meet your family's needs so that you can take care of your family that way. And that's been the driving force behind, from our government, and it's been a driving force behind this budget.
Thank you, Minister Robinson. That I think wraps up the time that we have for questions today. What I'd like to do now is ask the chair of the board of the Delta Chamber of Commerce, Rick Gibbs, to please take the podium and make some closing comments and thank the minister. Rick.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Minister Robinson. I met you actually playing croquet a couple of years ago, and I believe you were the housing minister at that time. I appreciate everything. Yeah, hopefully. I really appreciate everything you've said. I do work with Lana Popham through the BC Food and Beverage Association, and I know your slide about the hospitals there, one of the things I know she was working on was ensuring British Columbia fruit growers and food processors are having access to our hospitals, because we kind of uncovered the fact that a lot of our hospitals are getting fruit cups from China, as an example. And, we've got some of the greatest fruit growers in the world. So I like to hear and see you guys working together on this stuff, and I appreciate that. We've got a lot of work to do. And yeah, just on behalf of Delta and everyone on this call, thank you very much for today.
Well, thank you. And if I can just finish off with a story, Alana Popham's story around those fruit cups, because I remember the day that she raised it actually in the House. We were in opposition. And she was appalled that this was in a seniors care facility. They were serving peaches in a fruit cup. And the peaches came from China in Peachland. And she was appalled. And that story always stayed with me because it didn't make any sense. where we grow peaches, that we wouldn't serve, you know, our seniors and others and our children peaches from our own province. And so she's been a tremendous advocate for, you know, Grow BC, Buy BC, Feed BC, and we should be very proud of the work that she does. And I promise you that we're going to start seeing peaches grown from peachland in facilities in peachland.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Minister Robinson. We'll be sending you an invitation to our croquet tournament once we have the opportunity to put it on here in Delta.
I'll get working on my swing.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.